Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. What's next after the convert surge? Every year we are seeing a rising number of converts across the world come into the church, especially in the Easter Vigil. Now, I want to be clear here, that doesn't mean that therefore the church is having complete net positive growth. It varies in different continents. Nonetheless, what happens after the converts come into the church? JonMarc Grodi, Executive Director of the Coming Home Network and host of the Journey Home, joins us to talk about the importance of mystagogy. JonMarc, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Marcus, very well, thank you. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you and your family as well. And share with us what your experience was like this Easter Vigil, the amount of people that came in and the thoughts that were running through your mind.
Oh, Peter, unfortunately I was unprepared for this one because we didn't attend the Easter Vigil. We went on Sunday morning to my brother's parish. We have a bunch of little kids running around. We didn't want to disturb anybody else's Easter Vigil experience, but I know at our local parish here, as well as my brother's parish, they definitely saw numbers this year that were astounding in terms of new people coming to the church for all different reasons, from all different backgrounds. It was really, really wonderful to see and begin to hear their stories now after the fact.
Tell us, therefore, your your thoughts on the growth of the numbers of converts each year as they come into the church.
Yeah, it's been such an interesting past couple of years seeing these numbers grow. And, there's lots of speculation as to the reasons. It's interesting that it doesn't seem to be limited to a particular demographic or age or part of the world. It seems pretty global. And so it seems to have something to do with the time period that we're in. Actually, at one of our conferences last year, Dr. Bergsma speculated as to, the spiritual effect of the Jubilee year that we just celebrated last year. And I think that's certainly a part of it. But it seems to me that there's a greater visibility the past couple of years in terms of a more unified Catholic identity. I think Pope Leo has given us a great example. And we've also seen a number of high-profile conversions the last few years, and I don't think it's so much individual stories of some of these more public converts, but just the fact that people are seeing Catholicism as this option. On the one hand, there are more notable figures becoming Catholic, at the same time as that there's actually greater anti-Catholicism in a certain sense in the public sphere and in the political world. But I think that visibility has brought the Catholic Church as an option to people's minds in a way that it hasn't been in the past. And so there's just a lot more interest. And of course, in the noisiness of the modern world, I think people are looking for something solid, something ancient, something traditional, something a place where they can go to be formed in a right relationship to truth. I think that's what people are finding in the Catholic Church.
What is mystagogy?
Mystagogy is such an important part of the conversion process. Becoming Catholic and the journey, the Christian journey, doesn't end once you become Catholic. Mystagogy is the initiation into the mysteries of the Church, and it's a concept that goes back to the early Church, when there was even more of a sense of guarding the mysteries of the sacraments, of the doctrines of the faith to new converts. And so, as they became Catholic and these mysteries were revealed to them, the ongoing catechesis, understanding of what not just the doctrines of the Church, but how those doctrines apply to a person's ongoing journey, how they unfold in the sacramental and prayer life. That's the process of mystagogy, and it's a really important part of the catechetical process.
Share with us the role that mystagogy plays in this catechetical process, especially for these new converts who've come in.
Yeah, well, one thing that we see, we've become more sensitive over the years of the Coming Home Network. Obviously, a big part of the journey for many people is sort of the intellectual journey of exploring the Catholic faith, searching for the truth, in many cases getting over anti-Catholic bias, answering a lot of the questions, the assumptions that they have about the Catholic Church. And so that intellectual journey, those apologetics, that seeking the truth, that's an important part of it. But then, of course, as you approach the Catholic Church and make the decision to join the Catholic Church, again, obeying this prompting of the Holy Spirit, leading you on this journey, we've become more sensitive over the years that, after we become Catholic, it's not that the intellectual journey ends necessarily, but it is important for people to recognize that the journey itself isn't characterized essentially by a continual, ongoing gathering of information. It's not primarily an informational journey. That the information is there, coming to know the truth is important, but ultimately it's about then living that out, responding to that. And so as people become Catholic, again, especially we deal with a lot of people who have read their way into the church. They're big bookworms, they're studiers, they're people who are seeking the truth in lots of ways. That the mystagogy becomes very important, that as they actually enter the church and then they begin to actually live the Catholic life and encounter a lot of the ups and downs of Catholic life, a lot of the changes, the shifts. They're recognizing they're still shedding a lot of Protestant baggage in many cases. And they're getting over, in many cases, most cases, a little bit of the honeymoon period of becoming Catholic. Now it actually gets to the place where the rubber meets the road, where I have to build a prayer life. I have to, bring the faith into all these practical areas of my life. And so mystagogy is this unfolding of the deeper meaning of the prayer, on this journey of prayer that we're on as Christians, and the sacraments as these efficacious means that God shows up and gives us His grace and imparts His divine life to us, but then how we take that out and continue to put it into practice into our lives. And so this shift from the journey not being merely this journey of the mind, but a journey of habits, a journey of lifestyle, a journey of relationships, a journey of continual conversion of our whole life, turning that over to Christ and submitting that to Christ. Again, it's necessarily a process. It's not something that happens one time, and it's not merely informational. And it doesn't happen in isolation either. It happens as part of a community. It happens in a community of fellowship as the church. And so this ongoing conversion, I think mystagogy is an important piece that helps to kickstart the life of the Christian in this journey of ongoing conversion as a Catholic.
In that sense, therefore, mystagogy is rightly catechetical.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
so from there, then, sorry, I think we missed each other there. From there, then, the problem that we probably see in a lot of Catholic communities right now is we are immersed in the mystagogical life, but it has become rote ritual. Can you please speak to that?
Yeah. My father always said over the years, in response to the question of why people do not become Catholic, why aren't more people open to the Catholic Church, and he always reduced it to three primary reasons that he gave, and that was ignorance, prejudice, and bad Catholics. In other words, there are the things that you don't know, there's your ignorance. Mm-hmm. There are the things that you think you know, and that's prejudice. And then there are bad Catholics. In other words, there are examples that run contrary to what you're coming to know about the Catholic Church. And so, as someone becomes Catholic, this catechetical process, part of it is helping a person, again, transfer from the book to real life, to the things that they've read, to the actual experience of the Catholic life. And that is often missing in many circumstances, that there's sometimes people become Catholic and there's sort of nothing after that to continue this journeying process. But one of the things that converts often struggle with is trying to tease apart what's the difference in my experience. Sometimes there are things in the Catholic Church I just don't understand because it's a culture shift, and I haven't been through that culture shift yet. I'm still learning what it means to be Catholic. But there's also just examples, in any particular parish, there are problems, there are people who give bad examples, there are sinners. I raise my hand here as the first and foremost of these. Mm-hmm. And so the convert has to kind of go through this process, again, of encountering the church in the flesh, and that takes accompaniment, and that takes, an ongoing unfolding of these mysteries.
That work, therefore, is not just about learning and constantly diving into the mysteries of the faith, but also just blowing the dust off the treasure that we already have in our hands.
Yeah, and so many Catholics, again, even lifelong Catholics, or people who've been in the church for a long time, are in many ways just as in need of this mystagogia as new converts.
My guest is JonMarc Grodi, Executive Director of the Coming Home Network and host of The Journey Home. We are talking about mystagogy, the importance of mystagogy, and effectively, in light of the numerous converts who've just entered the church, welcome home. What is the role of mystagogy in all this? Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter. Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Speed. I'm talking with JonMarc Grodi, host of The Journey Home, Executive Director of the Coming Home Network. JonMarc, you were talking earlier about how this life of mystagogy is one that every one of the baptized is a part of, whether we realize it or not. Can you speak to that? The fact that we can take for granted that we're part of so great a mystery.
Yeah, this concern about not taking for granted these great mysteries we've been given is, I think, a key emphasis of mystagogy. In his encyclical, I think it was Sacramentum Caritatis, Pope Benedict talked about kind of three parts of this process, or three elements of this process. And one is interpreting the rites, the mysteries, in light of the events of salvation. Number two is presenting the meaning of the signs. And the third is kind of bringing out the significance of the mysteries to our Christian life. And so, in other words, we have these great mysteries, but obviously there's just so much there. Our mystagogy needs to help place these sacraments in salvation history. Where do they fit in this historical living faith that we're in? How do they come to us? The faithful need to understand that part. They also need to understand the meanings of the signs themselves. What's happening in these sacraments? What's this dynamic between grace and our assent, our showing up to these things? How do they work? But I think ultimately the most important piece, or one of the most important pieces here, is this significance of these mysteries to the Christian life. And I'm going to read just this quote from Sacramentum Caritatis. He writes, part of the mystagogical process is to demonstrate how the mysteries celebrated in the rite are linked to the missionary responsibility of the faithful. The mature fruit of mystagogy is an awareness that one's life is being progressively transformed by the holy mysteries being celebrated. The aim of all Christian education, moreover, is to train the believer in an adult faith that can make him a new creation, capable of bearing witness in his surroundings to the Christian hope that inspires him. So in other words, we have these great gifts of the sacraments where God shows up. We can be sure that he shows up. But they're not magic, right? They're not magic totems. They're not magic words. There's still this dynamic of our showing up and our participating and our receiving and our carrying that grace that we've received, that divine life, back into our lives, into our work, into our relationships, into our prayer, into our decisions. Bringing out that dynamic on how these sacraments give us, bring God's grace to us, incorporate us into his life, and then how we are to take that out into the fruit that is befitting conversion. That's, I think, a key part of this mystagogical process. And again, going back to what you mentioned earlier, we have so many faithful, and we all fall into this at times, who can show up and receive the sacraments and sort of just go through it as a mechanical process. We have to constantly be renewed in this realization that the sacraments are God's invitation for us to show up and to enter into his divine life, but then we have to participate, we have to take it with us, we have to go out, share the gospel, we have to go out and live the Christian life. And so there's this dynamic process of grace and our cooperation with grace that has to take place in this ongoing conversions, ongoing Christian journey.
From a practical perspective, how does mystagogy make all those mundane, daily, transient things in life really come alive in the Catholic lens?
Well, again, I think one of the special things about the sacraments, and we see this because we're often seeing them at the Coming Home Network through the eyes of people who are coming from a non-sacramental tradition, is that, again, contrary to what's sometimes said about the Catholic Church, again, we're not attempting to work our way to heaven or earn our salvation. And the sacraments are actually preeminent examples of this because we don't do much. We show up, and we faithfully show up and do what Christ has invited us to do. But he's the one showing up and working a miracle there. He's showing up in the Holy Eucharist and giving us the great gift of his body and blood so that we can receive and be incorporated into him. And so the sacraments, again, if we properly invite people to encounter this reality that we believe in them, that helps to animate the rest of our life, that God is a God who is pursuing us, he's showing up, he's giving us his grace, and he's calling us, sending us out to share his life with the world. And so, again, there's this exodus reditus sort of thing going on. Again, we return to Mass, we receive these mysteries, we receive the body and blood of Jesus, we adore him, we worship him, we receive him. But then he sends us forth to do good. He sends us forth to be his hands and feet. He sends us forth to practice the Beatitudes in our life. And so this rhythm of the Christian life, in the liturgical seasons, in our seasons of feasting and fasting, we just came out of Lent and now we're in the Easter season, these seasons of work and then returning to Christ and receiving the sacraments, this rhythm helps us to keep living in this tension, living in this dynamic of grace and our cooperation with grace.
In that more vibrant sense of a participation in this, mystagogical life, how does that then inform the way we approach the liturgy and the sacraments?
Well, I think it helps us to, again, be really conscientious of what's actually going on there. Mm-hmm. To not fall into a mere ritualism, not fall into a mere mechanic, to recognize that we are approaching the Almighty God. And how do we inculcate this in other people? We can certainly say it, but I'm very sensitive as a young father with 6 kids and one on the way.
Congratulations!
So much of it comes. Thank you, I appreciate that. So much of it comes down to whether or not I live that out, and even in little things that we're invited by the Church to pray not just in our minds and our hearts, but to pray with our bodies. And the Catholic liturgy exemplifies this, that we're invited to stand and kneel and fold our hands and to sing and to close our eyes and to walk up and to receive. That the way that we use our bodies reverently, piously, shows what we believe in our minds, right? We communicate not just with words, but with our actions. And so, the mystagogy is a whole person process. It's certainly continuing the catechetical process of teaching and explicating the faith, but also accompanying people and leading by example, showing them how to approach the Holy of Holies, showing them how to approach these mysteries and to receive them worthily, and then to especially show a unity of life between how we present ourselves, how we show up, not just in the church, in the chapel, right, at our parish, but how we show up in the other parts of our life. So there's this unity of a sense of the presence of God, a sense of his active presence and his call for us to live out the Christian life in all parts of our life.
From an abstract perspective, the theology is deeply illuminating. So our listeners right now, they're probably wondering, what are some practical ways I can start taking a hold of this mystagogy that I'm supposed to be living?
Yeah. Well, I think first and foremost, a dedicated, determined daily commitment to prayer, that in one's personal life, through the Liturgy of the Hours, the Rosary, other means, a daily dedicated commitment to prayer and to the sacraments that the Church invites us to. But then, Marcus, I lost my train of thought there. What was your question again?
Practical ways, right? So you said a dedicated life of prayer.
Sorry. Yeah, prayer, dedicated life of prayer and sacraments. And then in terms of a practical way to study, certainly if there's programs available at your parish to involve yourself with those. But we really underestimate this great gift that we have in the Catechism. It seems big and intimidating, but if you crack it open to the Life of Christ section or to the sections on the sacraments or on prayer, it's actually amazingly approachable in unfolding these great mysteries to us. And so I think studying the Catechism and obviously staying close to Scripture and reading that. But then, I think being very faithful in taking the grace that we received in prayer and the sacraments and just being faithful to the vocations that God's given to us. Again, I think we have the big S sacraments in the Catholic Church where we know that God shows up in a very special and profound mystical way. But we also, as Catholics, recognize the sacramental worldview, that we live in a world that is just permeated with God. And so there's no insignificant parts of our life. There's all these little ways in which he invites us to follow him. And so living out, bringing God into all these little parts of our life. Again, there's no neutral territory in life. Our work, our relationships, our money, our time, our health, our sleep, all these things are opportunities for us to order our life towards truth, to invite God to be with us and to walk according to him. And so, prayer and this continual journey of learning and of growing in virtue and living out the vocations that he's given to us.
Now, we're just about out of time in this segment, but I sincerely second everything you just shared. And if I may be so bold as to suggest, try
Yeah.
to try to find at least a week, once a week, of being able to make a holy hour, because I've personally found that being before the mystery helps catechize the soul to appreciate immersion into the mystery. Now, how can people find out more about the kind of work that the Coming Home Network is doing?
Absolutely. Yeah. If you go to chnetwork.org, we have all kinds of resources and services for people who are considering becoming Catholic or considering coming back to the Catholic Church for those who have left, as well as for converts who are now Catholic and they're in this mystagogical process. They're really, maybe they've been studying a lot, but now they're really, it's unfolding in their lives and they're really learning what it means to be Catholic and to live a fully Catholic life. And so we have a newsletter, we have an online community, and multiple weekly calls where we come together as a community to pray and to study together and to discuss the ongoing journey, as well as in-person opportunities, retreats and conferences where converts and journeyers come together to share their stories and to pray and to continue the journey together. So that's all at chnetwork.org.
Thank you so much, JonMarc. My guest has been JonMarc Grodi, Executive Director of the Coming Home Network, host of the Journey Home program. He and I have been talking about this word, mystagogy, which simply means the ongoing initiation and immersion into the mysterious life of the faith, which means all of us, the baptized, are part of this mystagogical journey. Let's appreciate that. Let's live the mystery in our ordinary lives. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.